last PUG for the year, but I think we've got a lot of good content for you tonight. Just running through. The idea of tonight, we'll probably start off a lot more technical. Who'd say here that they're a level 1, sort of not much knowledge about the cloud, just learning? Yep. Don't have to. We're all friends here. We're not gonna tease you or anything. Okay, so if everything seems a bit too much at the start, it will get easier. The idea is that we'll be starting off very deep diving on the cloud tonight, and then getting simpler to the point where we'll be building something within 3 minutes right at the end of the night, to show that even though there's all this complex theory behind everything that we're doing in the cloud, it really is something that the majority of it you probably can't ignore. You can just build something very quickly, but it's also nice to know of everything that's happening in the background for when you want to take it to that next stage. So definitely we'll be starting off at that high level 3 and working our way towards the end of the night at level 1. Just didn't want to scare anybody if you're expecting level 1 and building our way up to level 3. Didn't want to scare you and go, geez, this is going to get even more complicated. We're going to go to level 4 next. So the outline for tonight, just do quick introductions, quick thanks to our sponsors, do a quick cloud recap about what happened in the last month around cloud. Then we've got a guest speaker from Veeam, talk to us about what in the DevOps side of things that we can leverage from Veeam there. Then I'll be chatting to you briefly about the DevOps on Amazon AWS. Then we'll be getting into WordPress on AWS and Azure, doing a bit of a comparison there, and then doing a build. Hopefully, I did do a quick check beforehand, everything looks good, so the demo guides hopefully are going to treat me well. So just an introduction for those that are new to PUG. We've got over 250 members now, but over our other groups like Google and AWS, it comes to about 600 members. 2016, we are looking for speakers. We've got a roadmap for the entire year. We've got topics worked out for every single month for the rest of the year. We have been looking at our members just recently to see if anybody would be interested there. We haven't actually reached out yet, but looking at it, there seem to be about 33 members that were very excited about speaking, so expect a call soon. 63 maybes. And then everybody else is either a definite no or gave me a paragraph about why they might want to in the future or something like that. Interesting read, actually. I didn't realize there was so much content on our members' Q&As there. But if you don't hear from us in the next month or two and you are really interested in speaking, let us know. And also a lot of those maybes and a lot of those no's may have been from a year ago when you weren't quite comfortable with cloud, and now you've got a lot more experience or something that you'd like to share with everybody else that you've been doing. So feel free to let us know. Volunteers, always looking for volunteers to help out. And then just the whole concept of this is really no agenda except for it to be around cloud. Yes, we've got sponsors, but we try to keep this agnostic and hear really about what you guys want to learn. So we have a poll up on the meetup site. If there's any topics that you guys really want to hear about with the cloud, jump on there, put your votes in. If what you want is not up there, then let me know, I'll add it to the poll. And then just our coffeecloud.net site is where we've got a lot of the content from each of these. Videos of every event goes up there. We are a few months behind at the moment, but that should, over the Christmas break, get caught up on. And then, yeah, if you're running or know of any other cloud-related user groups out there that would appreciate having their sessions recorded and then professionally edited and put together and put up online, let us know. Happy to help them out. Use the sponsorship dollars that we get to help out other user group communities out there. And then just finally, usually we have a lab demo server sitting over here. It's not there tonight. I was a little bit lazy, I must admit. I I really didn't want to lug so much gear up here tonight. But usually every month we do have a demo lab here that you can try out before talks start for the night. We've got Red Hat, Windows Server. We're about to put Veeam on it. All those sort of hybrid solutions that are hard to test out in the cloud alone that you can come here and just try out. And hopefully next year we're also planning to have somebody there to give some spontaneous demos to people as well. So just a quick thank you to our sponsors, Nutanix, doing the hyper-converged hardware. They've got the plugins to all the major cloud providers as well for the storage. I believe they're even in some cloud marketplaces now, so you can have a virtual compute storage appliance up there that ties in with your Nutanix hyper-converged. Trend Micro with their security. Again, they're also on a lot of the marketplaces out there to look after your edge security. And Veeam, who's come out tonight to talk to us about their product. And then just Coffee Cloud as well, just where we're putting up a lot of the content from this. Hopefully next year we can start leveraging our puggroup.com site and start building that out. And Softchoice, where I'm from. So I've decided to give us a whole slide now instead of sneaking us in there. But as you can see, we're very involved in the cloud. It's not where we grew up from, traditional infrastructure and those sort of things back in late 80s. Where's Bob Hardy? He'd be the expert on telling me. What year did Softchoice start?
1989.
89?
Yeah.
I knew it was 80. Okay. 89. So we've been around a long time. Got a huge technical sales force and all that goes along with such a long history throughout North America. A lot of great people on the Amazon side, a lot of great people on the Microsoft side, VMware and other services as well. All those cloud providers, IBM and that. Which is why I love the fact that I can turn to those experts and ask about cloud. I try to keep agnostic about all clouds, but we have a lot of specialists that deal with certain clouds in particular. And CodeCore. Obviously they get the biggest slide. You noticed it got a bit bigger. So they've been great all year, giving us this this spot to have our event every month and talk over the top of their presentations and students that are off in the background there. So they've been very accommodating of us here and in the old location that they had. If anybody, I should give them a wrap, if anybody's wanting to freshen up on their education, they do boot camps here around coding. So I won't try to do their sales pitch, or not that I really know it, but yeah, jump on to codecore.ca, I'm guessing is the website. Okay, so the cloud recap. You can see I haven't memorized all this. I also have to look. So Google, yeah, there's a lot of talk about Google getting serious about cloud. It was only a couple of months ago that Windows Server became general available for Google, which was an eye-opener for me. I just assumed that they already had it. And I think that was probably the start of things to come, that they're becoming serious about enterprise. With this whole Alphabet reshuffle of their organization, they've now done what I've been saying is crazy for ages, the fact that they had so many cloud divisions all working separately against each other. They've now brought them all together, and they've also brought on board one of the founders of VMware. And I don't know how involved they have been in the cloud direction of VMware, but obviously it makes a lot of sense to have some leadership there around their cloud and bringing it all together. So I have been, I do a lot of, I would say, hobby work on Google, but I've never really taken them seriously for a business side of things. I've never felt that their example customers that they have out there are all that great, when Snapchat seems to be their biggest one. That they're sort of customers that if they had downtime, I don't think it would, people would probably notice Snapchat, but wouldn't be a big controversy. Whereas now I feel like they may actually turn a corner and get serious about this. So it's something I also say is every time I'm looking for updates from Google, they only seem to make all these announcements at their conferences every 6 months or 12 months. So it's sort of like everybody wonders what's happening with Google for about 6-12 months, and then all of a sudden they make this platter of announcements and we all go, oh, they're catching up. And then all of a sudden we have nothing. So hopefully that's a change, because I love to see competition. I love to see the other big players get a bit more competition there. Microsoft Azure. So they've now released for their Office 365 a new product. They've got these E-categories of their product offerings where they've got bundled in Skype and Office and things like that. Their new E5 though is interesting. They're now offering with their Skype link service to actually have a virtual PBX and have your own phone numbers come straight into that cloud service. So previously you had to have a hybrid solution where you had a bit of on-premise, a bit in the cloud, so that you could have your normal phone numbers coming in. But now they're actually looking after that for you. So that'll be very interesting. I think a lot of clients have been waiting for that. So that'll make also that whole journey of having a unified communication system actually become a reality. Like, everybody talks about unified communications, but in the end you have this blob that looks after 80% of what you want, then you have to have all these extra pieces, which makes it complicated. The Azure Preview Portal got a lot of updates just last month. The user experience and interface has been refreshed. There's also a new recommendation service for their app services. We'll be going through the app services tonight about really the whole idea of app services to make mobile applications and website applications very easy and quick, and sort of like a SaaS solution or a platform as a service for your mobile apps. So they've now got recommendations there. I guess you can see this two ways. You can see these recommendations as something where it'll help you save money and be more efficient and use features you didn't even realize were there. But also on the flip side, you can see it as a good sales technique from Microsoft to help you realize that there's other services to buy. Sort of like that impulse buy of the chewing gum and the chocolate as you're getting up to the counter and you flick them into the conveyor belt to purchase. So, yeah, I mean, if you're careful with your credit card, it should be a good thing. And then Amazon. Always a lot of announcements around Amazon. I've tried to pick out the most relevant ones to the DevOps topic tonight. So EC2 dedicated hosts are now available. I may have talked about this since reInvent. I think this is a big deal. The fact that this actually kind of blurs the lines between public cloud, private cloud. You can now have your own dedicated hardware to run your VMs on. So you're not sharing the hardware with anybody. Obviously the network layer and the electricity and things like that are still shared. But a lot of colos and private clouds are now doing that anyway to save costs. So this is a big deal, especially around licensing. There's a lot of server licensing that people have on-premise that they couldn't use in the cloud. They had to purchase cloud licensing. The Windows OS itself was a big one. Everybody wanted to bring their own Windows licensing up there. That's now possible, plus Linux licenses as well. So, and then just AWS Config is a new service that they announced at reInvent. So it helps you keep compliant with your services that you're running in Amazon. That is also, they've got that tied into their dedicated hosts, so you can use that. It's not straightforward and pretty, but you can use that to help manage your licenses that you're running. So those bring your own licenses. When Oracle or somebody else comes out to you and says, hey, we're doing an audit, we need to make sure that you've been compliant with your licensing of how many CPUs or cores you've been running, you can turn to this config and it'll help you generate a report to show you what you've been using in the last month or year. And then just general availability for the Go programming platform, the SDK there. And this is actually interesting. Last month I was actually talking at the iOS user group about developing on AWS. And at the time, only Objective-C was supported in Amazon's DevOps environment for mobile development. Now Swift is. Swift is the new programming language that Apple has adopted as of, I think it was beginning of this year or last year. I think it may have even been last year. So that's great. The dev farm, for those that don't know, is the idea that you can do all your coding in AWS, and then when you want to test it on an actual device, you don't have to go to a third party to actually do that. You don't have to worry about complicated steps to get your code to test on a physical device. Amazon have quite a nice wizard-based interface to get those things working on iOS and Android. Not BlackBerry or Windows Phone yet, but we'll see. So, give a very quick introduction to Scott, wherever he's hiding there. Very quick, because I know that you've got a slide introducing yourself anyway.
Yes.
But one interesting thing I noticed when I was trolling through your, I probably didn't use that word right, but through your LinkedIn page, is you actually worked at Amazon.com as a web specialist back in the day.
Yeah.
Back before AWS.
Yeah. I think that maybe we're starting to sell DVDs, maybe. Like music, just maybe. Mostly books and music, I think, when I worked there.
I'll hand it over to Scott.
Thank you. So just, how do I click forward? Is it the one that doesn't have an arrow on it?
The one that's worn out.
Like it's well used. Look at this.
Nobody goes backwards.
This guy must talk a lot in front of people, I think. Maybe that's true. So Pay by Phone, I have to ask you the story. Do you work at Pay by Phone, or do you just get a free shirt from Pay by Phone?
I work with them.
You work with them? In what capacity?
Headhunter.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
I love that service. That's great. So if anybody works at Pay by Phone, the guy with the Pay by Phone shirt on is in the room right now, and you should totally talk to him. I didn't even know that. Honestly, he did not pay me to that. There's no, that's just funny. We used it today, didn't we?
Yeah, we did use it.
What's the neighborhood we're in? It's the place with all the Lululemon girls.
Kitsilano.
Kitsilano, yeah, we're over there. We used it. Great service. I love it. So I'm from Seattle. I've lived in Washington State my whole life. I've spent a few years and a few months in different spots. And so I'm a Veeam software engineer. So what I'd like to talk to you today about is DevOps in the cloud, which is kind of the theme of what we're talking about today. So who am I? I just said I grew up in Washington State. Who else am I? I'm a husband, which I guess is a part of my identity at this point. Been married probably, it'll be 18 years, I think, this week. I've been with my wife. So a long time. I don't look that old, but I assure you I am. I'm creaky in all the right spots. I've got 2 kids, 10 and 7. My hobbies are, and they have been since the late 80s, snowboarding and hiking and running about, and I'm not sure in what order. But and I've been a system engineer probably since I left Amazon. I think that was the kind of the time that I decided to debark and kind of go in a different direction. I think I was kind of doing website development back in the day, and I did a lot of early sort of floor watch. Does anybody know what Amazon floor watch is? Show of hands there. Amazon floor watch. It was an early thing that we did at Amazon.com where we basically had guys that sat around and watched to make sure that things didn't go down, and if it did, we started calling people like mad. So I worked with a bunch of those guys, and so I kind of demarked from there, and that's why I'm here. So what are we going to talk about? So I think when we talk about cloud, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in the back there, please, because he's the cloud expert. I'm just a poser really when it comes to it. But the world according to Veeam. So when you talk about cloud, it's really all about how you frame the conversation in my mind. If you're an Amazon customer, you're an Azure customer, Google, maybe you work for Revelo, which is a shim between all those services that deploys their own hypervisor into those infrastructures dynamically. That's weird. Never heard of that. The same guys who wrote KVM. Did you know that? I didn't know that. So to define the cloud, so let's define the cloud from a Veeam perspective. So I'm not trying to say it's your story, it's not my story. And what's the Veeam cloud story? Right. So in my mind, as a Veeam system engineer for the Northwest, I think of public cloud, those being things we talked about mostly principally tonight would be Azure, AWS, vCloud Air to a certain degree, Google Cloud. I should have put that on there. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe I was writing it too quickly. But then there's the public-private cloud, which I think is in our mind from a Veeam perspective, managed service providers, which is a whole other kind of bag that really is kind of coming online. And I sat today and had lunch and coffee with the folks from SoftChoice, and we started to talk about in Canada, because I'm from the Northwest on the state side, you know, what does the cloud look like for you folks up here, and how it's changed with, I guess, notions of sovereignty, like things that are totally new to me. So again, it's how you define it, where you're from, where you're at, where you're going. You know, so managed service providers have been something that Veeam is focused on, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then there's private, which I would say is an in-house data center for a larger company that maybe does it all the time, you know. So they kind of consume their own services, right? So Amazon is kind of a classic example of that, right? In their own way, they're a private in-house data center to themselves. My neighbor Martin, who's been the customer service software developer manager for the customer service software at Amazon since the late 90s when I worked there with him, which is down the street around the corner. He has a nice, really nice audio setup, if you're curious at all. He's kind of an audiophile. You know, they can't even deploy some of their own services internally on AWS, which is weird. It's ironic, but it's true, you know? It's like they're just not ready for it yet. So it's this groundswell effect of how are we going to get from here, where we've always been Amazon, deploying things to ourselves, and then we have this new business model, and sometimes it reverses on itself, and maybe Daniel can talk a little bit about what they're doing now, because he's actually no employee at Amazon. So he probably knows way more about their internal infrastructure than I would. So. But at any point, I guess my thought around the cloud services as a Veeam system engineer is that they kind of fall into these kind of broad categories. So you kind of keep them memorable. So we play in all those spots. So as we should, because we're trying to earn money and sell software, right? That's the principal goal of what we try to do. So, oops. So let's talk a little bit about Veeam replication of the public-private cloud. So what is a public-private cloud? Let's just back up again. It's the managed service provider, right? As seen on TV. So with version 9, which is a software platform that we have coming out, we're going to be able to replicate directly to this public-private cloud notion. In other words, there'll be guys in Vancouver, BC, and all over Canada, as they are down in the US. And how many managed service providers do we have right now? Do you have a list off the top of your head?
6,000 worldwide, 3,000 North America.
Do we have a count for Canada?
I think it's like 400.
So quite a few guys, right? So really what it is it's a bunch of folks that have already had, maybe they had a colo facility that they've already managed, maybe they've had data centers that they've always used. It could be a company like SoftChoice that already has a bunch of smart guys in a room that they're going to go deploy data center software. And so our model is to come in and say, let's deploy our Veeam Cloud Connect software into your infrastructure. And then once that's done, we can easily, with our on-prem software for customers, replicate your instances of virtual machines out into the cloud. So what does that look like from a tactical perspective? I'll just draw it real quick. So if this is your on-prem DC here, you've got all your little VMs that sit right in here. Can you guys hear me when I talk to the board? That's hard to hear sometimes. So this would be my on-prem situation here. So I might have a Veeam wrapper that sits and over a 443 connection out here to an on-prem or an off-prem data center that sits over here. You can replicate these systems out. And that's a great way of just getting your data out, right, from a DR, business continuity perspective. But with replication, what it really is a way of taking the thing that's prod and putting it somewhere where maybe it's less expensive. So that would be a managed service provider instance. So what does that look like? Well, it's image-based, so it's app-quiesced. So if it's Linux or Windows, we make sure that those disks are quiesced and they're flushed all the writes, and then we take a snapshot of it, the whole thing. And then we copy deduplication and compression and send the change blocks across the river, right, to the other side of town, wherever your managed service provider would be. Why I mean, that's neat from a systems integrator perspective or a solutions integrator perspective. It's also neat from a system engineering perspective. How many guys in the room are system engineers versus developers? Got one system engineer, two system engineers, so a couple of you, three. So how many guys are devs? Right, most of you are devs, right? From a developer perspective, why do you care, right? Because that's really who we're talking to mostly in the cloud room. You should care because you can turn that thing on with a failover scenario from a Veeam perspective. So if you work for an entity that leverages our software, you can have a situation where you could replicate it to a managed service provider, and then you could actually turn it on and do some sort of change management work to that thing and turn it off and leave it alone, right? You could fail over to it, right? So you could do, there's all different kinds of versions of failing back and forth. And from a cloud perspective, it provides you the resiliency to move your content around. So data gravity, which is that thing that keeps it in your data center, you can push it out and go further out. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? So managed service providers, clear as mud? Yeah, we got a thumbs up. So what is Veeam replication to the public cloud? So I was kind of, as we talked about earlier, just sort of a cloud overview. There's a lot of moving parts to infrastructure, and I've spent probably the last 15 years building a lot of infrastructure. From a Veeam perspective, I think the most compelling thing that I'd like to leave with you guys is, if you work in an infrastructure that has NetApp storage, is that there's a thing called Cloud on Tap that is now available in AWS. And what Cloud on Tap is it's just a piece of SAN software. Oops, what did I just do? I did something. You help me. The Logitech's smarter than me.
Just press buttons.
Oh, is that what it is?
Turn it off and back on again, or press buttons.
So show of hands for guys who are familiar with NetApp software. Anyone deployed a NetApp array simulator? So it's kind of like a simulator. Do you remember Cloud Edge? Remember that? ONTAP Edge? Yeah, so it's sort of like ONTAP Edge. So now we've got this idea of Cloud on Tap. And over here we've got this NetApp array of some sort, right? And it's a storage platform. And now in AWS, I can deploy an instance of a SAN and attach some storage that exists inside of Amazon's Web Services environment, right? Over here, in the future, I'll be able to deploy something over Azure. I just met with, a couple of weeks ago, the cloud business developer guy. He used to be a Microsoft employee, and he's in charge of making sure that the cloud program at NetApp works well. And he told me in an email today that pretty soon they'll have Azure services, and you'll be able to take a Cloud ONTAP instance and deploy it into the Azure cloud, right? You'll also be able to deploy, well, now you can deploy it currently into AWS. There's a couple different licensing models you could go through. It's not really important. The important piece is that they have got this software that exists on the array that can take this and it'll replicate it out to these cloud instances. So I can have a volume that has, data X on it. And I can take this and have a replica of the same thing, right? So it can be a replica of data X. I can also take these two, so if I blow these two out, I have AWS over here, and I have Azure right here. I can deploy instances of this Cloud on Tap right here, here, and here. And then I can do replication between these two guys. So that's like, they did actually demo that this year at Insight at 2015 in Las Vegas. We were watching the video today. The founder of NetApp was talking about this. You literally can drag this thing over here on top of that thing, and it instantiates a replicated instance of your volumes that sit on those systems. That's crazy. You remember how hard it was to set up a Snapmare relationship and manage that back in the old days? You had to be wicked smart to do it, right? It took a lot of time. You had to read a doc. You're like, what's it doing on this interface? You're scratching your head. Like, do I care about that? Where's the default gateway? I don't know. Like, what's a v-filer? What? There's a lot of detail in that, right? You have to think through it. That's why we get paid real money to do this stuff. So what's really amazing about it is they're working on Cloud on Tap, which is this sort of overlay that sits in front of you that allows you to sit and look at, oh look, there's AWS, or there's Azure. I can deploy instances of storage that have all the intelligence that they've been managing from the early 90s, you know, building this infrastructure over and over again, iterating through this software design. And I think they've released like 3 versions in the last 18 months of the software, which is normally 1. You know, just for this Cloud on Tap stuff. So their iterative levels of design from a code deployment perspective, even within their own cloud unit, is greater than the hardware manufacturer can do, which is saying a lot, right? The fact that NetApp has said to their management team, we don't care about what you do from a hardware perspective, customers are going to care from a software perspective. So it's any smart storage manufacturer is going to do that. So peeling back the onion, why I'm even talking about this right now, on-demand snapshots. Why is that cool from a cloud perspective as it relates to Veeam, which is why I'm here? It's neat because I can turn these things on from a snapshot. In other words, our software supports the ability to take a snapshot and use FlexClone and turn on the systems that are resident on those downstream snapshots on the array. And a snapshot from a NetApp perspective, technically what's neat about it is that it's a redirect on write, right? It's not a copy on write. So when it redirects, it just points to the new block that's changed in the storage infrastructure. In other words, when it's changed in Azure, the only thing that I'm changing from an IOPS perspective is what's going forward. So I'm spending less money on IOPS, spending less money on storage types potentially, and possibly even re-architecting my application to accommodate these kinds of efficiencies that sit over there, right? So as you begin to think about cloud and how I deploy it, Veeam is interesting because I can turn systems on and make a sandbox in the cloud. I can leverage these really kinds of forward-thinking storage technologies, and they can be born out of my infrastructure that sit on-prem in my old school data center. So I can start to talk about my CIO, you know, hey, you ever thought about that in the cloud? I know you have NetApp, have you thought about using Cloud on Tap? You know, do you guys back up with Veeam? There's a kind of a rich story around it. So if you need to get something deployed relatively quickly, you know, maybe that's a good way to look at it, right? So I would look at other storage manufacturers the same way.
Most development scenarios are in a development environment which are separate from your existing environment. They're probably not updated, they're probably not patched, and they're not current. Where in this scenario, you're doing your development on a current infrastructure, a replicated copy that you did the night before.
That's a really good point. So another really smart point. So this stuff that sits over here in your on-prem data center is the exact thing that your customers are hitting, right? It could be in a co-location facility, for all I know, right? Likely is if you're a smart person, right? You don't want it near the river where your van's at, right? So, you know, the fact that you're copying this data out here to whatever this is, or potentially just running it native to these things.
You're developing your coding in a real-life scenario that you can easily move over to somewhere else, rather than developing in a, you know, probably in a development environment that you just kind of put this together from scratch with old hardware, or in the cloud that's kind of too clean to have the nuances or upgrades and patches and of everything in your environment. You're putting your code in a real-life scenario that you can apply and then easily roll in production. You won't have any nuances in it, or if you don't like it, you scratch it.
So a story that rings true with a lot of guys that do systems work is, you know, how do you manage change management? And usually, I told the story earlier today, it's usually around a donut on a Tuesday morning with a bunch of people and some coffee. Right? That's usually how it goes. And there's like Julie, she's super nice, she makes muffins, they're like really good, but you like the donuts better, so you're glad when she doesn't come, you know? But the change management is usually a human problem, right? We all sit around and go, yeah, is everything changing? I don't know, should we try it? You know, let's go. Then we have some backup procedures that usually get us out of the hot water, right, when we get into it, because it invariably happens. Somebody recompiles a DLL and forgets some dependency. We were talking about dependencies and developers and how awesome they are sometimes at doing that, right? Understanding that. So it's the idea that you can take this thing and make it repeatable, right? It's working today. I made that change, and I know the exact thing that was changed, and it didn't work. So you're zeroing in, so you're lowering the operational cost of troubleshooting. You can sort of zero in on stuff that way. That's another idea. Did we nail that one? I think I don't need to belabor the point. Question?
You mentioned secure. What kind of controls do you have in place?
For Veeam or for NetApp or
For
AWS?
for Veeam, your solution, what kind of controls are in place?
So we have deduplication and compression and encryption native to our software. So you can do that directly off of our software. It goes, and we manage the keys in our enterprise manager product. It's a separate website. NetApp has a solution that I think it's OEM. I met some of the guys that manage that a couple of weeks ago, and I need to knuckle down on that and figure it out. But they've decided as a company to store the keys off-prem, so it won't be in the cloud. So I know Amazon has its own cloud services portfolio for encryption. And I think that NetApp has said, well, we're going to bolt this OEM thing on. And I'm just struggling to remember the name of the software. I mean, I'll leave here tonight and go out the pint and remember what it's called. But it's, I met the engineer, and it's out of California. It's not coming to me. But it's a software suite that they bundle in with the cloud on tap, so you can have it on-prem. So it's secure in that sense. So, and the reason why they did that is because when they deployed cloud on tap internally at NetApp, they wouldn't let the lawyers and the bean counters wouldn't let them move stuff off to the cloud because it didn't have encryption built into it. And so that's why they rolled their own on that one. So.
Also, security can be said from another perspective of, if I'm doing development on the secondary side, how am I going to keep it interfering with my production environment? Our sandbox has different IPs, so we get, as soon as we create a sandbox, we separate the IPs from your production environment. So there's no connection to your existing environment, so you can do all your development in there. So I don't know what perspective you're talking
So in that respect, how do you do configuration management across the app? Is it done by the developers themselves? If you're doing brand new IPs and stuff like that?
So yeah, we should probably talk afterwards because I'd like to talk about more like what the use case, you imagine the use case would be. But so you could do failover within the application that would accommodate layer 2 and layer 3 kind of personality changes. Okay. Though I think that you would probably be happier with our net masquerading utility that automatically gets deployed and that will manage that for you, and then you can just sort of work around the problem. So you can have everybody have the same gateway. You can route on a stick through the environment if it's a multi-subnet interfaced thing that you need to get through. We can talk about that though.
No, I was just wondering.
That's how we would solve that problem.
Okay.
And so you can deploy labs directly from Enterprise Manager. So from a developer perspective, if you don't want to hold these guys' hands, no offense. If you don't want to hold their hands like we do all the time. But I would say that you could have them provision labs through a portal, and then you can work on the back end. And there's PowerShell scripting you could probably do to automate that if you wanted to get really nerdy about it. So this is kind of a nice graphic. I'll go back. Kind of pretty. Doesn't really say much. I just think it's pretty looking. Back up from NetApp, SnapMirror, and SnapVault. So this is kind of an interesting idea. So in version 9 that we've got coming out, this eliminates the additional impact from backup activities on your primary NetApp storage. So let's see. Where's the laser pointer on this one? Is it the top one here? Oh, look at that. It's green. So here's the primary storage. SnapMirror is the replication software. SnapVault is the ability to kind of put a snapshot on top of a snapshot, right? So you can vault them into the same set of volumes, and it doesn't track all the blocks, right? So it's a really efficient way of putting more data somewhere else. But it's on the same array. So historically, you would put it on a secondary storage platform, which in this instance, going over here, it could be AWS or Azure again, right? Because we get a cloud on tap. Over here, it's just showing just sort of a secondary, just genericized secondary storage platform. You got backup, it rolls over here. Our software can push it over into this direction. Neat conceptually because I could then push it down somewhere to like an AltaVault device, which could destage it to even further to like Glacier or something like that. So if you're talking about cloud service, you're talking about backup, you're talking about cost of putting something somewhere, you can insert a virtualized instance of AltaVault, which would push that content down further into a dark, dark hole, right? It reminds me of that Middle-earth scene with Gandalf going over that bridge with that giant, I don't know what that guy was, what was the name of that character? But it goes down, way down there, right, where Gandalf went, and then he came back. So this is AWS Cloud on Tap, so just a nice graphic to illustrate that it's replication, and it uses all these clever protocols like NFS, iSCSI, CIFS. And the last thing I would say is that we have this concept, and you kind of keyed on it a little bit, which is the virtual labs. So offsite backup. So we could essentially just do an offsite backup to something as a way of introducing cloud into your infrastructure from a DevOps perspective. You could take it and just do offsite backup, and then you could have a managed service provider, probably not an AWS or an Azure entity, but maybe more of a kind of a boutique entity that would manage that for you. And you could spin up white box ESX in the cloud and then restore virtual labs from your backup file. So I'm not doing it on a SnapMirror instance that sits out here in a clever on-demand sandbox way. I'm really doing it just out of my backups. And if I deploy a certain set of offsite backups to a kind of capacity with IOPS, enough storage and throughput to make it happen, you could take infrastructure and turn it on right away, write code against it, deploy new stuff, check it out, have an analyst go look at it. So that's another, maybe a third way you could look at it. And this is just kind of, it illustrates our Veeam Cloud Connect software. And I should mention that beyond, if you, I don't know, does anybody have like a, we have a 120 socket minimum of our licenses, which is, you know, generally it's going to be quite a few ESX hosts on-prem. Do you guys have, is there anybody in the room that has that kind of amount of hosts in their environment where they have 120 sockets that they deploy code to? No, yeah. Well, so there's, if you ever go work at a place, like maybe pay by phone gets really big all of a sudden. We have a Veeam Cloud Connect for enterprise. So if you go work at maybe say Rogers or something like that, where they just have a lot of compute, right? I've been talking to T-Mobile. They have 900 hosts and 14,000 virtual machines. You know, they would be a great customer for Veeam Cloud Connect, so they become their own private cloud. So they would buy our software and they would replicate to their own cloud instance, and then they would failover for all 14,000 things, right? Just as an idea.
What's WAN acceleration?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So WAN acceleration, right here, we have a product inside of our software, and this could actually be useful from a managed service provider perspective, and thanks for bringing it up. And we have a digest, and we can do a hub to spoke kind of thing where you have many different sites. I'm working with the Department of Transportation down in Washington State. They've got offices all over the state for, you know, roads and stuff. And they have all these offices, so they need to back up this content to some mothership, right? Some data center in Olympia or some capital location, or maybe it's on the east side. And the WAN acceleration software has a digest on the source side that keeps track of the content, and then on the far side there's a global cache, and then we'll send just the change blocks, and we'll accelerate it that way because we keep track of what we send across the wire. And there's sizing guidelines that you can come up with, and it's included in our software, so it's not like an add-on or anything. Yeah, it's pretty neat stuff. I mean, how many folks use the WAN acceleration in the customers you sell into?
I would say it's a 50-50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have a need for it, it's like, wow, that's great. You know, you can use it for replication, offsite backup. You can use it as a managed service provider. You can use it with your own stuff. You know, so there's a lot of flexibility there. It doesn't require SSDs or any fancy spinning lights or anything like that. It's just regular hard drives and software. So going back to the cloud idea, right? It should be just easy to do. It's all about the algorithm, I guess, in that sense. So I don't know if I've got questions about
Yes. Do you support like object-based storage? Like.
So that's it. Yeah. So I'm working with a customer in Alaska right now, and they're using NetApp storage grid technology to create object-oriented storage that exists in both the big part of Alaska, the middle cold part, I think in Anchorage somewhere. I'm not really 100%, and then somewhere down in Portland, Oregon. And to host that data for customers that actually have, you know, just like VMDKs and stuff like that, you know, or VHDXs, they've put the AltaVault, which is the SteelStore acquisition that NetApp did recently, that takes the software and then puts it out to S3 components. So I can take a local data set that sits anywhere on a robo site, or it could be in your primary data center or a secondary data center, and you ingest it into this AltaVault software with, you know, any kind of backup software. And my argument to this cloud architect guy is that he should buy Veeam and resell it, right? That's my play for the, that's my selfish play. But you could use anything for that matter, and you could ingest it through AltaVault and put it into that. And that's probably the coolest object-oriented sort of, vSphere to object-oriented storage land thing that I've come up with thus far, but there's probably others I haven't thought about yet. Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah.
How many E's in Veeam?
I think there's 2. Did I have to screw it up? Oh man, you caught it. Thank you. There's always somebody. There's just 2. And actually, you know what? You're the second person that's pointed this out. I forgot to update that, so thank you. I almost got them all. There's a few. I got my last prezo I did out in Florida. This is down there. Yeah. Yeah, so this is on I-90, and this is right here. That's Mount Rainier down south. And then that's Lake Catchies. So it's a little reservoir that sits on top of Snoqualmie Pass, which is where my kids and I go skiing all the time. So about an hour out of the city. And with that, I think I'll shut up. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. We have a giveaway tonight. I was trying to think, what should we use? What's the criteria for giving something away that's neat? I could just make it up.
Best hat.
Best hat? I don't know if that's fair, although that's clever. We got 2 hats now. How do we do that? Rochambeau for best hat? I don't know. Yeah, I think maybe let's do it by who traveled the longest to get here. That's a fun one. So who's 20 miles?
Furthest distance or longest?
Furthest distance, I'm sorry, yeah. So who traveled the furthest distance in kilometers? Because I won't say miles. I guess it's clicks out here. Coquitlam, how far is it? How many clicks is that? 30? Is anyone further than 30? Surrey, how many compared to from where we're at right now?
40.
40? Do you agree, Mr. Coquitlam?
Depends on
We don't want a fist fight outside in the alleyway. Is it 40 clicks? Is that you?
Yeah, Surrey's further.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. So this is tile, which I guess explain it to me one more
It's
time.
a locator for your keys, or you put on your keys, use Bluetooth and your phone to keep track of all your objects. So if you lose something, you'll find it pretty much. Right?
Oh, cool.
Right? That's a little cool app.
Yeah, and going back to the whole cloud idea, which I thought this was, I really keyed on this when you started talking about it, and I thought this is fantastic.
Yeah. So I had lost my keys
Yes.
from a late night of drinking. I'm not going to say where I was,
Yeah.
right? But let's say I had a couple drinks in me. I was in Montreal. Montreal has lots of wonderful places to go.
Yeah.
So I went back to Toronto, where I'm from, and I lost my keys. I had no clue where they were. But the app sent me a notification said somebody who had the same app as you was walking by your keys, and they found it somewhere in a parking lot in Montreal, and sent me a notification to the parking lot in Montreal. I went back to Montreal with the app, and found it, and I found it in a parking lot in a ditch. So,
Cool.
What he was doing in the ditch when he lost his keys, I don't know.
who knows
I
why
think
was
we
there,
need to
what
know.
I was doing.
Don't ask.
The fact that Bluetooth from somebody else's phone could like triangulate that stuff,
That's pretty good.
that's wicked smart. I mean, I was like, whoa, that's somebody thinking, that's like taking it another level, right? It's almost like paying for a coin meter with your phone over the internet and having almost as cool as that. Shameless plug. I do like pay by phone now, I'll be honest with you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you much. Yes, appreciate it.
Okay, continuing on from the DevOps topic, just going to fly through for you guys just the options out there on AWS. So this is what I narrowed it down with. Obviously DevOps is quite broad. I could only pick one cloud provider. I'm a little bit biased towards AWS. I guess because they just started earlier than everybody else. So
Everyone's biased for AWS.
I feel like they're the ones everybody's copying them. So this is how I would break it down. This is not some graph I stole from somewhere. So there could be some typos or something. I made this myself, but I kind of broke it down to the way Amazon's sort of broken it down themselves. There's developer tools and management tools. You've got code pipeline, code deploy, code commit. A lot of people might not know about these yet. They're just brand new. They're about managing your code. I can see a lot of, if you look up anything on DevOps around AWS, you'll probably find a lot of third-party apps out there that help you manage your code for continuous deployment and that. This is where I kind of see Amazon have jumped in there and done it. I haven't actually tried these out yet. I'm still on the traditional old school way of doing things. But if it follows the tradition of anything Amazon does, that they are not going to kill off the third-party market, you'll probably find if you're already using something else that it's probably just as good or better. And this will probably pressure them to get even better. But if you're not using anything today and you want to start off somewhere else with managing your code, this is a great place to start. And then obviously you'll start evolving from there with others mentioning other products that you could use and start going outside of the ecosystem of Amazon. But that's the thing I like about Amazon. It's not like one thing I didn't like about the whole Apple ecosystem in the past was that you had to buy Apple, it had to be an Apple mouse, had to be. So that's the one thing I've made comparisons in the past that I feel like Amazon's doing the same thing that made Microsoft big, which was that you didn't have to buy their brand all the time, you can plug into others. But and just lastly, you got the SDKs, IDEs, and command lines there. So also on top of that, I was going to put in that they do have a web interface that you can jump in, but then we're getting quite basic and granular. So, and the icons were hard to locate. And then management tools. A lot more of these are mature. So there's OpsWorks, which has been around since the early days of them doing OpsWorks and CloudFormation. CloudFormation I'll be going through in a second, showing you guys how to build something with CloudFormation within 3 minutes. CloudWatch for your logging and monitoring of what's going on. CloudTrail again for just seeing what's been happening and audit reasons. Config again, audit compliance, those sort of pieces. And then Service Catalog again, being able to control what everybody's using to make sure that people don't have full reign of the farm and spend up a big amount on your credit card or monthly AWS bill. So, what I'm going to go through in a second is just doing a quick, now in theory this should be 3 minutes, but I'm probably going to waffle on and explain what I'm doing, so it might take a few minutes longer for each. But the idea is I'm going to show you 2 different ways of deploying a LAMP stack, in this case WordPress, on Microsoft Azure and Amazon AWS. Just wanted to explain the concept of what we're going to be doing. So with Amazon, we're really going to be leveraging CloudFormation. Now there's a million different ways to deploy something in Amazon, but CloudFormation is probably the easiest one to do quickly as a 3-minute demo. And the idea will be that we'll be deploying something now. I will skip over the Route 53 piece, but there you cannot look after your DNS and your domain name. Then it would, so the traffic, the outside world will be accessing your WordPress site coming down. So we come down, I should really use that later pointer, shouldn't I? There we go. Come down to the load balancer. Now the load balancer, you're going to say to it, okay, now we could say start off with 2 virtual machines, or we could say start off with 1, grow to a maximum of 2, or a maximum of 50, whatever the numbers that you set. But it's going to have a look and it's going to balance that, but you'll also have auto scaling put in place, which we've got here, which will work with the load balancer to say, look, if I'm reading a certain threshold in my CPU memory that you set, let's build out some more servers. And then the load balancer is going to share that mode to the more servers that come along. And then in the back end here, we're using RDS, which is Database as a Service. So we could deploy another virtual machine here and have the database, the MySQL database running on that. Or we could even just bunch it all up into one VM. But obviously the advantage here is that we can auto scale here with the VMs to the front end. And then in the back end, we can have Amazon looking after the database itself and looking after all that auto scaling and load balancing for us. And therefore, we've got these VMs then talking back to the database. And then for backups, I do see a lot of talks all the time on WordPress about doing backups, and I'll quickly show you how easy it is. It's basically a click of a button. We can use other services, we can have cron jobs or other things triggering off backups as well, scheduled backups. But this really does beat anything else I've seen out there when people are talking about WordPress and backup and some other solutions. If you can back up somewhere where it's 3 cents a gig, then archive it off to Glacier storage for 1 cent a gig for historical backups. There's not much out there that can beat that, unless obviously there are services. Every other service out there seems to be a little bit more expensive, but you can justify that sometimes by something easier. If the 3 minutes I spend seems a bit too complicated, then there's probably services out there that might take you 2 minutes and you'll pay an extra little bit of premium for that storage. And then finally, the Amazon CloudFront. I did steal this image from a website. I'm just realizing now, I probably would have put the CloudFront up here for the idea of, it's a edge cache for your website. So we won't be going into this CloudFront bit, but the idea is that this location here, you have to pick one location somewhere. So you're going to pick maybe somewhere in North America, Europe, if that's where your client base is. But CloudFront allows you to have locations all over the globe and cache a lot of your data that's static up there. So, and another good thing there is with WordPress, you can also take advantage of putting your images in an S3 storage bucket. They've all got HTML pointers to them, so you can put in your code a pointer to that storage, and therefore you're paying 3 cents a gig for that storage instead of the storage for your EBS volumes here. I think is around 55 cents. It's more. It's been a while since I've crunched the numbers. But anyway, that's the Amazon overview of what I'll be showing you in that quick 3 minutes. Now for Microsoft, looks a little bit fancier. I probably could have got a fancy diagram like this for Amazon as well. But the truth is, I was a little bit lazy. I didn't want to draw up. So half of this, just mind ignoring. Because probably half of this makes it more complicated than what you really need for a WordPress site. What we really need is, here's the end user here. So the general public, they're coming in, they're hitting a load balancer. Just like back here, we've got a load balancer here with Amazon. Same thing here on the Microsoft Azure, we've got a load balancer here. That hits now an application service. So the difference here is you don't have to worry about virtual machines, you don't have to worry about that whole auto-scaling piece that we were on Amazon. Now, Azure does have the same thing as Amazon, where you could actually put a virtual machine there. But I thought just to show a different comparison of how we could work in Azure. So it's more as a platform or software as a service type front end. And then it's actually going back to SQL backend here. So here's Azure SQL, but we'd be using MySQL. And then finally, you could tie that back to mobile services. We won't be going through that because I don't do that with the AWS either. But there are other pieces here we can tie in with their Active Directory for policies for access and things like that. So there's a lot of other things going on here. This line here actually talks about going out to your CRM system. But again, all this that's here is also possible on Amazon and other clouds as well. But just to give you an overview of what we will be doing, we'll be doing this load balancer bit, we'll be doing this web application, and we'll be doing the SQL piece here. So, let me pull up a chair and quickly go through this. So 6 minutes, whose time? Okay. Okay, so luckily for everybody, I did do a little bit of preparation. sort of like a cooking show where you've got all the vegetables and everything pre-cut. So with the Microsoft Azure, whoops, okay, it's not coming up. Bear with me just a moment. Okay. So here's our coffeecloud.net website. Now if we have a look with built with, we can see that it was actually built on Microsoft Azure and using WordPress. So I actually have, I think, pulled up here. So this is what it looks like today. So this is actually how I've got Coffee Cloud running on Azure at the moment, running there in the West US region. And I won't go through this tonight, but I've actually gone to manage domains and I've set up through GoDaddy for the URL to also be managed by Azure. But because my demo account, my Microsoft account, only lets me have one MySQL database, I've actually set up a trial account tonight with Azure so that we can build one from scratch here. So basically all you've missed by me jumping to here, we've got a fresh Azure account. Nothing's been created here. All I've done is give my credit card details tonight before this demo and just logged in. That's it. Nothing else has been done. So what we're going to do now, we just go to Web Apps. We click on Create a Web App. We go from Gallery because there's already some templates that people have already put out there, including Microsoft have put out there. Now there's a lot of templates we could pick. If we just go to Blogs, and Drupal's up the top because they've stuff A, but right down the bottom here we've got WordPress. So we basically select WordPress and they've got this nice little wizard interface here. So we just go next, give it a URL. Now we need to make sure that we pick something that nobody else has picked. So probably if I wrote demo, it's probably going to say somebody else has already got the URL, demo.azurewebsites.net. So we'll go PUG demo 2. Because I already know that I used PUG demo 1 earlier just to test it. Pretty sure. If we go PUG demo 1, oh, it still works. Maybe because I deleted it. But anyway, just to make sure that it doesn't fail. So we're gonna say create a new MySQL database. Obviously, if this wasn't a fresh account, it would give us also the option to use an existing one if we'd already created one. And then below, we've also got some options, which I'm going to skip over tonight for the purpose of this demo. But a lot of options around authentication keys and details for other application tie-ins. But we're going to be unsecure tonight just because I know I'm going to delete this 5 seconds after building it, so there's no real point. But obviously, I wouldn't encourage anybody, obviously, to skip ahead and not do credentials. Now this bit here is good to be mindful of, is this little agreement down the bottom. Oh, by the way, up the top, we're giving a name to the MySQL database, so the wizard is going to create the front end, the database, everything for us. And we also get to pick the region. Now obviously we'd already picked US West for the front end, so it's best to keep it all together. Otherwise we're going to see major latency. But this tick box down the bottom is just something I didn't realize when I first started using Azure's website as a service. Is there's actually a company called ClearDBs who actually looks after the SQL database side of things. So if you go up the tiers to where you can do backups and things, you actually get you actually jump out of Azure for going to restore your backups to ClearDB's website. So that was something That was something I didn't realize, and I got caught out by that because actually the Coffee Cloud website outgrew the free tier that ClearDB has. So they're a separate company from Microsoft. They've got different pricing models for their database piece. So even though I've got $200 in credit per month from Microsoft to run on Azure, I still had to pay ClearDB to look after my backups. So that's something just to be mindful of. But obviously, if you're using this seriously and you're not cheap like me and not wanting to pay for demo setups, it just means that you're getting 2 separate bills each month. But it's not that expensive anyway. Well, depending on the size of your workloads, I guess. So that's it. We're done. Now it's going to deploy and build that in the background for us. We don't have to do anything else. That's going to sit there creating, and once that's done, that's it. So we probably could have done that in less than 3 minutes actually, if I just bang, 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 click next, next, next. Very easy. Obviously we skipped through the security piece. We've skipped through actually the domain name bit. The domain name you're probably going to go backwards and forwards with making sure that GoDaddy or your name register knows that Azure is authenticated by you. Normally that's GoDaddy is the one I normally stick to because they normally have tie-ins straight to the cloud providers, which saves you doing something like a text file or something like that to point to for verification. A lot of the times now GoDaddy will have some sort of like just log in, next process that you do on 2 different websites at the same time, which is a lot quicker than waiting for its sniffer to find your piece on your URL. So there we go, we're finished. It's finished building. We click on the URL that it's given us. Obviously, if you have done through your name register, that would be different URL, but this is the URL that they give you for free.
No, that's just a single instance, right?
This one, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's no replication, no load balancing.
No, but if we do go into the details, so to get into the details, you click on the arrow, and under config and scale, we can actually configure there the details like the size of the instance, the size of the database, the scaling, how much we want it to auto scale. One thing I do always point out is it's good to put this on always on. Now we're at the free tier at the moment, so we can't change this. But if you do go to where is it? I think it's under scale. We can actually set here whether we want to change away from free to standard. Free doesn't give you backups, as in on Azure. You could do your backups. You could install a WordPress plugin or something and do a backup that way. But as for a backup of the Veeam snapshot, which is obviously a lot quicker to back up and a lot quicker to restore, you actually have to go up to a higher tier. And by going up those higher tiers, you actually get a lot more of those config options open up to you. And the one that I always say, if you are going up to the higher tiers, make sure you take advantage of it by clicking on this turn always on. Because otherwise what's happening is, obviously it's free tier, so Microsoft are wanting to save some money, so they put your server to sleep if there's no traffic going to it. So obviously that first person in the morning that hits your website is going to be scratching their head, why is your site so slow for the first time? But then after that, obviously it's awake and the traffic starts flowing. But that first person, they could be waiting there for an extra 5-10 seconds, which we all know time is critical for people's attention these days. So yeah, always make sure you tick on that. That way it won't go idle and need to wake up. And yeah, again, the backups are very simple to find. You just go to backups here and you can set your schedule. Obviously it's grayed out because I'm on the free tier, but we can set a frequency and tier there. And yeah, so that's the WordPress site done. Here it's just going through a wizard. This is WordPress, our setup wizard. It's just going to go through the title of the site, so we'll call it PUG demo. Username for your admin access. Admin2, because we're really tricky. And email address. We're going to delete it in a second, so that's my favorite email address to give out.
So on this, how would you upgrade WordPress? Because upgrades come out all the time.
Yeah, just as you usually would, from within WordPress itself, from the admin console. Is that what you mean?
No, the actual. Okay, sometimes.
You
do
mean
that.
the major
major updates and stuff.
So there might be an easier way, but the way I usually do it is through FTP.
Okay.
But that's
So you
probably
can
me
FTP on the
being
server,
old
yeah.
school.
Oh yeah.
When you know the old school ways, you tend to shortcut things and go with what you're familiar with. I'm not quite sure whether there's ways within the Azure portal. Yep.
Do you need to change folder permissions or anything?
Yes. Yeah. So there's a lot of things like, that's definitely something that after you set up, it's like a normal WordPress installation. You normally have to go in there with your Linux commands and set things to. Obviously, don't set it all to 777. But yeah, that those sort of normal setups are standard here as well.
So does it use a specific version of Linux? A specific distro, I mean?
To be honest, I'm not sure.
So they're running it on Linux and not on Microsoft Windows.
Yes, it's Linux. It's definitely Linux. Yeah, I'm thinking back of it's been about a year or so since I did the Coffee Cloud, but I'm pretty sure it was Linux. Yeah, it's not. There is an option, I'm pretty sure, there to choose the IIS deployment and use Microsoft SQL backend. I do remember reading about that somewhere, but obviously, again, old school. I want to stick with what I'm familiar with. I'm still not used to using command line for Windows yet. Although PowerShell is something that they're starting to build into Azure. They got version 1 out now, so that's Azure. Did anybody else have any questions about that? I'll jump straight on to the AWS bit.
So basically you can now log into SSH here and do some stuff in the server, or it's like... Yeah?
That's it, it's done. So obviously we didn't do the credential setups and that, so I'm probably going to have to... There are ways to jump in here and reset your credentials. So we'd have to jump in there and do that. But yeah, we could definitely...
I have a question. It's just the database there. So on Azure, you're kind of tied into that third party if you're using their database, like which would be something equivalent to RDS.
Yes, it's equivalent to RDS. Sorry?
Do you get a choice on the type of database? Is it SQL or like Microsoft?
Yeah, so I picked the template
For
there.
SQL Server, they have like managed database, but
Right.
for MySQL, you need to use the third party, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
right.
it depends on which template you used. I picked the WordPress one, which is a LAMP stack, but like I said, they've got a stack that does IIS and Microsoft SQL. Obviously, Microsoft do a good job themselves at doing their own SQL database, so they didn't have to farm it out to somebody else.
What if it's Oracle? Not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Yeah, and they probably outsource Hadoop.
Hadoop.
That's on Apache, right? So Apache Hadoop. So HD Insight is.
Yeah.
is the
My gut feeling is that Microsoft wants to do all this themselves, but there's just been so much forward momentum by Azure to catch up to AWS.
Yeah.
You can see it in the Magic Gartner chart. They're the only ones right there next to AWS now.
Well,
but
even
in order to
AWS,
do that,
I think they have 3 choices or something with RDS, right?
with
Or-
AWS,
or-
yeah, you got
Yeah.
MariaDB, you've got Postgres, you got MySQL, and you got Microsoft
Oracle.
SQL.
Is it Microsoft?
Yeah.
Yes, Microsoft.
So, okay. So now we're going to have a look at this site, Kiss My AWS. So this is a site I created for reInvent, Amazon's reInvent. As you can see, it's a quick WordPress site that I created. Did a little comparison here if you want to have a laugh. It was obviously very pro AWS. There were even worse
you gotta make it
stats
back.
than this. I tried to make it look as though I wasn't too biased or talking down at any particular cloud providers, but I needed some sort of comparison. But if we go to built with again, you'll see we've built it on Amazon and it's using WordPress. So I'll just jump in over here. So this is my AWS console. I've already created this key here, PUG demo key, just in the interest of saving a bit of time. But this is an encryption key and this is the same thing for Microsoft Azure. If you're wanting to actually SSH or log into your actual VMs, then you're going to have to need that security credential set up. On Azure, we skipped over it. With Amazon, when I was testing this earlier, I tried to skip over it and it gave me a failure. So I haven't tested this yet. Hopefully it doesn't fail again. Hopefully I haven't skipped something else. But I will warn everybody that I am tempting the demo gods by not testing this stuff out. So you can see here, I've gone into CloudFormation. Now the idea of CloudFormation is we could just build everything manually. We could go to EC2, which is where the VMs are. We could build an instance here, a VM manually here. Then we could build RDS, the database. Then we could log in to the Linux instance, run our code to deploy WordPress and do it all manually. But the idea is that AWS has something similar to Microsoft in the whole wizard interface. So we've got CloudFormation here, which is like building a template. But not only that, we can actually later on, once we've built, deployed from the template, we can actually update the template as well. Obviously, I haven't built one yet, so we can't, because this one rolled back. But actually, it's good to see. If I tick this, I can actually see why. So if I go to, here's either outputs or events. Here are events. We can see over here, it says key name does not exist because I didn't give it the key name. I actually skipped over that quickly, hoping that we could skip the security bit just like we did with Azure, but obviously Amazon's more paranoid. So they're making sure that we don't put ourselves up unprotected. So we'll go create stack. We'll pick again. Amazon have a lot of templates just like Microsoft does. We could do the WordPress blog under a multi-AZ, which is what we were talking about earlier with that diagram of the load balancing out. But just in the interest of time, because that'll build us multiple instances, we'll go with the single instance just so that this is deployed quickly. So what this does, we'll just go into View in Designer, because what this is somebody's already written a JSON script which tells Amazon how to deploy everything. Oh, because our screens are a little big tonight, everything's very large. But I do like this new feature from Amazon is, well, it's a very simple diagram actually. That's probably why it was zoomed in. I'm used to seeing all the load balances and everything, but basically we've got an instance here that it's going to create, and it's going to be inside a security group, and that's it. Just to give you a quick idea, because I've never looked at, we're going to start again. If we were to go a multi-AZ, and we go to View in Designer, you'll actually see this looks a lot more similar to the diagram I showed earlier tonight. Now it's not pretty, obviously. You can move these things around if you actually wanted to create a deployment document. You can move these things around so that there's not all these crossovers. But the idea is that if I can move.
Do you know if this view is available for already existing clusters?
I'm pretty sure, yeah. I know whenever I've seen.
Yeah, you can visualize anything.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's because it's being generated by your scripting down here. So anything I click on up here, it's going to highlight it down here for the actual code. So you can jump in here, you can manipulate it and play around. That's getting a little off topic. Yeah, sure.
If you use one of the existing cloud formation, not the one that you lock down. If you go to the help, there are existing cloud formation templates. One for multi-using everything. One of them will create a VPC, which is a private network. You have to be careful because the default VPC that's being created is locked down. Only allows 480 and 443. Even if you allow in your security group more than that, it will still be blocked and you will wonder why.
Oh, really? Huh. Did not know. It was just saying that if you use the templates from the Amazon website, it's locked down. I haven't heard of that happen.
Yeah,
The security, the firewall, like security is
It's a
into
network
you.
ACL on the VPC, which is different from the security group that's attached to your instance.
Ah, of course, yeah. So you would have to delete them and recreate again. Okay. Probably, yeah. If anybody doesn't understand that, happy to explain it. We can explain it to anybody later on. But yeah, I totally understand what you're saying there. And that's another reason why I often say to clients to go double check something before deploying with somebody, because if you did make a mistake like that, that's like fundamental network, grassroots stuff. And if you find out later on, well, you've actually got to almost take down your environment, rebuild your network layer, and then redeploy everything again.
Pretty good about updating.
What's that?
CloudFormation is pretty good about updating.
Updated, yeah. But you probably would have some sort of, a little bit of downtime, no?
And it's surprisingly good.
I mean, if you had to rebuild your ACL and stuff like
Change your JSON, click update stack, and it will go.
that. Okay.
Do you know any good resources for CloudFormation? Like links or pages to go and look at, books?
What I don't really. Maybe them. Does anybody know if there's any good resources for CloudFormation scripts? Maybe on GitHub or something. I know Amazon's got a little bit, but it's
There's quite a few.
yeah. But the Amazon website itself, I think, is a bit limited.
If you go to the help, there are more.
Yeah, there's definitely more, but I don't know if it's quite as sparse as what I would expect elsewhere.
There's enough. And then Stack Overflow is some good help on how to use it.
Yeah. Alright, so yeah, just click create, select from these ones here. So you could click on designing your own template. If you actually have one that you've already created in the past, you can then you can point to where the template is, or as we were talking about, if there's if you found one on the Amazon website, you can actually point to the URL of where that's located. We go next. We'll give it a stack name. Demo 2. WordPress name. Give it a really complex password.
Can you use the micro instances? Or no
So it really depends on, I think, what somebody's written into the JSON script as options. So yeah, if it's an old script, if it's an old template that you're using, then there might be newer instances that have come out that don't appear there. Very easy for you to quickly jump in. It's sort of like HTML code in that you don't have to have read a manual to work it out. You would see the list of all these other instances and just make sure you format it in the right way, and you should be right. So we go next. Don't want that. Let's go next, and that's it. So that'll now create our stack, and if it works nicely, then that'll be it. The WordPress site will be created, and we would, to work out, it'll actually tell us think in the outputs or the overview, it'll actually tell us the URL. Once it's in the outputs, yeah. It'll actually tell us the URL. Again, just like with Microsoft Azure, it's going to give us a URL based off their domain name. The Amazon one is a lot longer, not as neat as the Microsoft Azure one, so it will be quite a mouthful. It's not something that you could easily just start sharing. You would want to do at least a URL redirection, a tiny URL, or set it up through Route 53 or through your domain name provider properly. It failed. Okay. Well, anyway, that's. I'm tempted to look into it. What have I missed? Same thing again. Anyway, that's basically.
You left it blank, I think. You needed to put something into it.
I thought I did put something in. Anyway, yeah. Demo gods aren't being nice to me on that one, obviously, but it's not Amazon's fault. This is my fault. I'm obviously skipping over things a bit too quickly because we're a little bit over time. But yeah, that's basically it. The differences I do find between Azure and Amazon, in my own opinion, is that Microsoft have done a really good job of their wizards, very nice, neat, tidy. Amazon's a little bit more raw, but I do find Amazon has a bit more options and it's generally a bit cheaper. But I guess if you look at the flip side, with Microsoft you're paying for it to be a nice, slick, clean interface. With Amazon, you end up probably paying as much as Microsoft charges because you're probably having to pay for a third-party tool in order to get that slick, nice, clean interface. So in the end of the day, they kind of balance out. It's just that Amazon's more of a raw tool, hence why under the pressure of the demo gods, I fail on the Amazon side, but I succeed without even trying on the Microsoft side. So just quickly going back, did anybody have any questions about that? Obviously, no questions about why I'm so crappy under pressure of building AWS, even though it's my favorite platform.
Just a suggestion, you could do it like with Beanstalk. Maybe it's kind of the balance between CloudFormation, like control everything versus Beanstalk, which you just upload the zip file with WordPress and it would work.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, yeah. There's definitely debate all the time about whether to go Beanstalk or whether to go CloudFront. It has been about a year since I have had to have that debate, and I can't remember the reasons why. I think Beanstalk, you're more getting into more granular in the code.
Yeah, well, I think it's just with CloudFormation you manage more things. You have to manage the VPC keys, everything, and Beanstalk is like, from my perspective, like you're a developer, it's like Heroku type, so more kind of platform as a service. So you have your bundle and it works.
Yeah.
So you can do it with WordPress as well. You select PHP. Give your zip file with the latest WordPress, and it will work.
Well, I guess that's what I mean by it's more focused on the code side than the framework and everything like that. Yeah. And luckily for me these days, we have engineers at SoftChoice that take care of the fun for me. I actually complained to my manager the other day. I go, I want to get my hands dirty every now and then. It's one thing to do a demo, but when it fails, you kind of can ignore it. When you're building something for a client like our engineers, they can't ignore it. They've got to actually work out what they did wrong. Although this is going to bug me, I'm going to have a look at tonight. Probably 5 seconds after this, I'll be like, oh, I didn't do this. But anyway.
You have, speaking of that, if you're stuck, who provides better support?
The support? Well, obviously you want to go with SoftChoice. So. I didn't pay him anything. So Amazon does have free support. It does have a 24 to 48 hour turnaround, and it's an email based. After that, you can start paying. There's paid monthly support, which starts bringing you up to having chat sessions or phone calls. And SoftChoice, we do the same thing, and we have the same pricing model. But we work with Amazon to make sure our service is better than theirs, but backed by them. So, and they don't mind that. They don't mind me saying that our service should be better than theirs, because that's the whole reason why they were able to certify us as a managed service partner in Canada.
Do you guys have any experience with the container service?
Container service? Yes. I
That's new.
personally haven't, so
Okay.
I definitely want to next year do a talk around that and start learning about doing that. But yeah, our engineers definitely there. Actually, one of our engineers is actually, he's got the premium master certification that just came out, which is like, I don't want to say a god, but he's definitely, he's my go-to guy
It'd be a
whenever
good
I get
talk to
stuff.
have as a container service.
Sorry?
The container service would be good for developers and for system engineers.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I'm actually working on a talk I'd like to give probably in February. I'll have to take a look at what the year schedule is like, but based on that,
Open to change.
probably February.
Yeah. Again, for anybody who wants to do any talks, we're open. We have a roadmap for the year, but obviously we're open to changing that. Obviously, the one that's announced next, we probably won't be changing that, but then after that, happy to hear others. Do we have a lightning talk? You guys, if everybody's okay to listen in for 3 minutes.
Sure, I've got to mention actually very quick. So hello everyone, my name is Niwa Kaviani. I'm the VP of Engineering at Keyratio. So what we do is that we're building mobile apps for social health systems. So the idea is to connect people with chronic disease to one another and help them discover people with similar types of disease. And then we also provide services for them to do medication tracking, activity tracking, monitoring of their disease, for them mostly to stay on top of their disease. And we also allow for doctors and caregivers to be connected to the platform so that they can basically monitor how the patients are doing in the system and whether or not they adhere to the drugs. So one research study basically shows that you can reduce the readmission to hospitals by 30% if you actually reduce the risks of, or basically you get the patients to adhere to their medications in the first month. So that's basically one of our goals in what we're building. The one reason I actually asked Matt to give me this opportunity to talk to you guys is that we're looking for back-end engineer, a systems engineer who can help us with cloud deployments. We're using Beanstalk and CloudFormation for deployments. And we were looking for people who can do consulting and contract work with Keyratio while we're actually doing the deployment of our system on Amazon. So if you're interested, I would be happy to talk to you and give you more details about what the job is about. All right, thank you very much.
Does anybody else have anything that they wanted to show off that they're doing in the cloud? Jump up. All right, lost a chance. I only give 2 seconds. Okay, so next event will be in February, Wednesday 3rd, 6 p.m. here at CodeCore on big data and analytics. From our polls for the year, that was the most popular topic that everybody wanted to hear about. So that'll be an interesting one. Again, vote for topics on the PUG group website. Just something quickly that Jeff from the Azure user group reached out to me today. Yeah. He wanted me to just let everybody know that there's a DevOps hackathon happening, a 2-day one. I've created a little tiny URL. The URL he gave me, I was like, nobody's going to remember that. I don't even want to type it in. So I've made up a tiny URL for everybody to use there. And yes, now that I'm going to have some time off to get onto these videos, we're going to get the backlog done and get all these videos for the last 4 months up onto the website up there. And again, feedback. We do this for you guys, so I get a lot out of it as well from the conversations and hearing others talk as well. But yeah, love to hear feedback from you guys and what you guys want to hear. Like I said, 33 speakers from our surveyable members said that they want to talk. If that's you and you're here tonight, let me know. Love to hear your pitch and where we can fit you in 2016. quick thanks to Drew for getting the beers tonight, the Veeam guys for helping out Scott with his talk, Bob there for moral support from Soft Choice, and yeah, there's forgot about this, Scott. I didn't know what your contact details were, so I'm sure if anybody reaches out to Veeam, just say, yeah, Scott, I want to talk to him.
Yeah.
They'll be like, yeah, we've only got one Scott in the company.
No, it's Scott.Howard, and I'll give, if anybody needs to get a hold of me, I can give a card out today.
And yeah, so thank you for everybody for coming.
Thank you.